and you don't want to, you're not going to disrupt those channels. You want to disrupt it as little as possible.
Mhm.
So so that's all, and that's always been the kind of, the roadblock as you talk to manufacturers. Well, I don't want to piss off, all of those people.
Mhm.
So, how do you start? I think starting slowly, with things like reorders.
David, how you doing, sir?
Great. Yeah. Good to meet you.
Yeah, man. Good to connect. I know we had initially connected on there was a LinkedIn post about kind of interesting things happening in B2B e-commerce. And you have, if you could talk a little bit about your company, 1024, and
Sure.
then also Slatwall, the platform that you've built.
Yeah. And it's funny. We're going to be removing a bit of that confusion come January because, for 10 years, it's been 1024 as the company and Slatwall as the product. We formed Slatwall as a separate company, and that's going to be launching in January. So we'll eliminate that confusion altogether. But
Mm,
yeah, we started 1024 in 2008. I was myself for a year and a half or so. And then I brought on two partners, guys I had worked with previously at another company. Um, they're both developers and come with a really good technical background, particularly in e-commerce. Uh, I'm not a developer, but I've been working in that space for a while on the biz dev side, operations, project management. So we started building Slatwall in 2010. We released version 1 in 2011. And the reason that we did that was we had built a custom e-commerce solutions over the years. And when we started 1024, we knew wanted to continue to build e-commerce solutions, but we didn't want to start from the ground up every time. So how do we create a framework that gives us that starting point? The things that every project is going to need, right? Accounts, products, orders, etc. As a starting point, and that's where kind of the concept of Slatwall came from, and it's evolved since then. We've bootstrapped the business from day one, so growth has come from projects, right, and the service revenue from client projects. So everything that we've built into Slatwall has come directly from a client requirement,
hmm
and was only built because somebody was paying for it. So that's driven the roadmap. It's driven the growth of the company, and it's been kind of slow, methodical growth, just like any bootstrap company would be.
Yeah.
And we were lucky enough from day one, and some of the things that we did in architecting. Slatwall has kind of set us up for what we want to do next, which is kind of accelerate that growth. But things like a headless architecture from day one, before headless was even had a name to it, really,
Mm,
right? So um, subscriptions kind of built into the core from day one. Some of the kind of setting architectures and some of those things, B2B kind of from day one. So those, not that they were done because of anything other than that was the way that our clients were kind of demanding it.
mm.
But that's kind of held us in kind of good stead as we continue to grow and bring on new projects.
That's awesome. Yeah, it's I've always bootstrapped, been a fan of bootstrapping, and both the companies I built were bootstrapped, and
Yeah,
I think that is such a holistic way to go. There's so much. Salesforce just acquired Slack for
yeah, yeah,
$27 billion, and I think in one of your posts you said something to the effect of, a lot of these VCs are playing numbers games, and it's a
yeah,
strange thing.
yeah. It really is. I mean, listen, you can do really well. We just made the decision, from the beginning, that we wanted to, control our own destiny, and build the company and the product in a certain way. It doesn't mean that we won't look to some equity financing at some point, but it really wasn't the path that we wanted to go down. From the get go, it's it comes with its own challenges, as right. It is a slower growth model. Cash flow is critical. You got to be really careful about hires,
Mm,
and bringing on resources and getting too far out ahead of yourself. So there's a lot of discipline involved. But again, I think it got us to where we are today. Um, and we've been able to compete pretty well against some of these companies that have gotten big cash infusions over the years, or have been acquired or gone public or whatever else, right?
yeah,
We're up against some big players, and so we try to play up that bootstrap model, and that kind of we might be smaller, but we try harder, right?
yeah,
Um,
yeah,
uh, it's just kind of the nature of the beast that we've built,
yeah. Yeah, I've been in the kind of the Magento world for a number of years, and Magento's been acquired a couple of different
Hmm.
times, and,
Yes, yeah,
I think those of us in the community haven't always felt that it's been best for the product
best,
itself. You
yeah,
know,
yeah. It's definitely a challenge, right? There's typically somebody's either making that investment or acquiring because they're looking for what's the return, right? Um, Particularly like in the Magento case where you had that community really was the reason that it became what it became, right?
mm,
Um, and is that in the best interest of the company that acquired it? Certainly not driving revenue necessarily. So it's yeah, it's a tough situation.
yeah,
I don't begrudge anybody wanting to make money, but
right.
there are different pressures that come with that kind of an acquisition or
Yeah.
even kind of a big infusion of cash.
Yeah. Yeah. I was talking to a buddy recently and I was like, so much of the time acquisitions don't work out very well. So
Right,
much of the time. And
right,
yet it kind of keeps happening. It's a
happening.
strange
Yeah,
thing. I'm sure it's a finance thing that, for the
yeah,
numbers people it makes
yeah. I mean,
sense.
I look at it as a good thing for us. It's we're over the years, we've sold Slatwall direct, right, to the customers, and we've done all the build, and we've changed that model in the last 12 months, where we're now bringing on system integrators, development partners to work with us, and those are those are shops that are using Magento now or using Shopify Plus, or
Mm,
and talking to the right, if we're talking to the right people, there's again, you kind of pointed to it in the Magento community. There's a bit of bad taste there, perhaps, and maybe they're not getting the support that they were looking for. I know, the whole 1.x to 2, kind of migration
yeah.
and all of that,
It's
right?
it's been complicated.
So, um, if we're able to go in there and show it, at least from the platform standpoint, that we've got some differentiators there, and that that we can be a better solution. The next question is, well, how are you going to support us, right, as a partner? Um, and I think that's where Adobe, might be missing the boat a bit, right? And that support for that partner, network. Um, uh, is a challenge, obviously, as you get bigger, right?
Yeah.
And so for us, it's an opportunity. We're not looking to bring on hundreds and hundreds of partners, because we're not driven by those kinds of numbers. We're driven by, let's find the right people, let's work with them really closely, let's make sure it works,
Yeah.
right? So it's just a different drivers,
Yeah.
right, for the business
What's
when you
the
don't have that pressure.
yeah, yeah, what's the origin of the name Slatwall?
So the slat wall is in a retail situation. It's just you like have pegboards that you would hang pegs from. Slat
Oh,
wall is just you hang
gotcha.
racks from. So, but back in the
Shows how
day,
much
there
I
were
know about retail.
retail, yeah. um, so that's if you look at the logo, there's kind of off the there's
Right.
three
Right.
slats coming off the side.
Right.
So that's where the name came from. Back in the day, there was a developer out of California actually who he had a POS system in a he was in a bike shop, pretty good size bike shop, and he was looking to build a connection between that and his website and the CMS. So he started working on this project internally, and he called it Slatwall. And we were using the same CMS, and he had written something in the community. I reached out to him. We had a bunch of conversations back and forth. He basically agreed to come on board and start to build with us. We re-architected a bunch of stuff. We build version 1 of Slatwall. He had named it Slatwall already, so we kind of acquired the name from him,
Nice.
and he ended up being lead developer on the project for I think 4 years, and then was kind of acting as an architect for another year and a half or 2 years. He's now CEO of a big 3PL out in California. Um, but that he came up with the name. I'm not going to take credit for that, um, but kind of passed it on and then came on board and was a big part of the growth of the company.
Nice. That's a cool name.
Yeah.
When it comes to competing, so I'm sort of, I've been real Magento focused, and lately I'm trying to kind of understand the broader ecosystem in e-commerce and the different platforms and the different strengths. How does Shopify Plus compare to big commerce and things like that? I've
Mm-hmm.
noticed a lot of platforms are starting to build subscription functionality into their core, and that kind of
Yeah.
becomes a selling point. When you're competing against, I don't know, Shopify Plus, you mentioned, how are you competing against them? What are some of the features that you're highlighting and things like that?
Yeah. So sometimes it depends on who you're talking to. Um, yeah, so a couple at a high level. One of them is the types of products you can sell through Slatwall, and subscriptions is a big part of that, right? So physical goods, merchandise, everybody kind of has that. The subscription piece, again, since version 2 in 2012, subscriptions have been core to Slatwall. So, and those have started off as being digital goods, right? Digital products. Scientific American Magazine has been running Slatwall since 2013. Right?
Nice.
So if you go to Scientific American Magazine and you buy a subscription to the magazine that's going to be delivered once a month and access to all of their digital products, I think it's 500,000 content nodes going back to the mid 1800s. That is all sold through Slatwall.
Nice.
Right? Uh, and then so there's a lot of complexity to that. I was watching was it Scott Buchanan you had on a little while ago, right? I
Hmm.
think he
Hmm.
mentioned we started looking at subscription. We're like, how hard could this be, right?
Yeah.
Well, it's difficult, right? How you record that revenue and the reporting and the renewals and it's just you know uh, complexity on top of complexity. So, we've been doing that since day one, and then just recently, in our next version release, we have a couple of clients using it now, but the next major version release will have scheduled shipments. So, basically, order templates, right? So you can a customer can create a cart or an order. Um, Put in whatever products into that order and then set a schedule, right? I want to get this every other month or every 6 weeks or whatever that schedule is. And then you know get reminders perhaps as that order is getting ready to ship. They could maybe change. I don't need it now, I want it 2 weeks later, right?
Mm-hmm.
And the client on the admin side can set the parameters around that. How far out can they push the order? What's the minimum order level? Those kinds of things. So you think about certainly that on the consumer side, right? I'm going to get my replacement blades for my my razor, right? And I want to set that order, and I want to get it every 6 weeks, and I can go in and maybe change that. I don't need them now. I need them a couple weeks later.
Yeah.
But then you can also think that on the B2B side, when you think about consumables, right? I've purchased some big piece of machinery, and I know every 6 weeks I'm going to need filters or new whatever, right? So that kind of order template subscription model as well will be kind of core to Slatwall. So the ability to do that within one system, sell them within one cart, uh, um, promotions, loyalty programs, different pricing models and price groups, the reporting, customer service, kind of all within one core is a big differentiator for us right now. Now, yeah, certainly there might be some platforms that are starting to build that in, but they're certainly behind where we are at this point,
Mhm.
um, and just because we've been doing it for such a long time.
That's interesting. So you kind of focused on some of this functionality. It sounds like several years back that
Oh
you've
yeah,
had it built out that has
yeah.
become really important for much of the industry. So you timed that pretty well.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I mean, and again, the challenge for us as a company has been, we've been kind of behind the curtain for such a long time, right? Uh, you know, from a marketing standpoint, from a sales standpoint. So that's our biggest challenge,
Mhm.
as a smaller bootstrap company. We to date haven't had a sales team out there, right? We've grown through referrals and networking and kind of
Yep.
organic growth. So um, that's only kind of changed in the last 12 months or so as we've started to say, okay, the platform's at a place right now that we're ready to scale beyond kind of our core clients we've been working with,
Mm.
like Scientific American, um, and you know let the rest of the world know that we've got this platform that can compete against some of these others
Mhm.
really competitively.
Yeah.
Um, uh, and just get that brand kind of awareness out there.
Yeah. You mentioned loyalty programs like
Hmm.
subscription functionality. It makes sense to me why it's important to have that in the core of the product. And there's a lot of clunky integrations, for example, with Shopify for subscription functionality that get
Yeah,
complicated. Loyalty program feels like one of the ones that kind of makes sense, can really work well as an extension or a third party app.
yeah.
And,
There's no, yeah,
you know,
I agree. It is. Again, it's a result of again the way that Slatwall has been built. So at some point along the lines, a client came along and said, we want to do loyalty. And I think we had a second client that said the same thing. So we built loyalty within the core.
mhm,
Now, almost every one of our clients uses Slatwall in a modular way, right? They're not going to, most of them don't use it end to end, right? So we have clients that just use it as a PIM, right? Just managing the
right.
product data and the structured data of the product, pushing that out to a front end somewhere. Some of them are using, a lot are using an ERP for fulfillment and inventory and
Mm,
warehousing, and Slatwall is dealing with everything up to that point, right? With that integration
mhm,
back and forth. So loyalty is one of those things, right? You can do a lot of really cool stuff with triggered transactional emails in Slatwall.
mhm,
You don't have to. You can use some other email system in order to do that, and we can just push that data out to use that other system. So it's I know Gartner's using the term composable. Certainly that's the way that almost every one of our clients uses Slatwall, right? It's and it we're finding very often that there are a lot of our clients are graduating from maybe it's a Shopify or some other kind of system that they started with in e-commerce, and then they start to hit a ceiling,
mhm,
and they want to bring in another system in order to augment what they're doing or provide some of the functionality that they don't have. They can do that with Slatwall without kind of ripping and replacing everything necessarily,
yep,
right?
yep,
Um, and then the same thing with if they're running an ERP system and they say, all right, we want to go online, we want to be digital. This happens a lot on the B2B side, where they're selling traditionally through salespeople or trade shows, but now they know they need to be online, not having to kind of rip up the entire ERP infrastructure, just
mm,
layer Slatwall there, um, and maybe they run a simple CMS, but then they want to add marketing automation down the line and CRM and all of these others, do it in a kind of phased
Hmm.
approach.
Hmm.
Those are the kind of two situations we find ourselves in kind of most often.
Nice. It seems like you've done a good job of prioritizing features in the core that are important. And as a company, like there's many companies that started doing custom e-commerce development as an agency, tried to build out a product, and then it fizzled out. So you've done something right there. I'm curious how you've decided to prioritize the feature requests you get, right? Because you're always going to get all sorts of feature requests when you're doing custom development.
Yeah.
Do you have any particular system that you've used to prioritize requests?
Yeah. Dartboard. Um, and so the company that I mentioned, my partners and I worked at another company previously. That company had built, going back into the late 90s, early 2000s, a CMS, kind of a homegrown CMS and e-commerce system.
Mm,
So we learned a lot through that. And so when we started, one of the things we did in Slatwall was architected it in a way that if we decided that something didn't warrant being built into the core, it could the, the architecture for writing custom code or custom add-ons
mm,
wouldn't affect that core and kind of the upgrade path and everything else that was happening there.
it's important.
So
Yeah.
we wanted to make sure that that would happen. The other thing is, Slatwall is open source, and we've done that since day one. We don't have a huge community, but we've got a community of developers around the world that use Slatwall, and um, they've added to that core as well, mainly through integrations. We don't, we're not doing an app marketplace or anything along those lines, but things like Canada Post integration for fulfillment in Canada, or some payment processor in Europe. That's been kind of added into the core along the way through that open source community as well.
Hmm.
But so that's the evaluation of how, if we build something into the core. Really, it's myself, my partners, and a kind of a small team here deciding, is it worth, because you build it into the core, you've got to build it in a way that it's uh, generally usable, being useful for multiple kinds of businesses, right?
Mm,
So it is. You might have one client that wants that feature, but you can't just build it for that one client. You got to build it in a way that it fits the rest of the architecture and is going to work for
right.
maybe the 4 or 5 other ways that somebody's going to want to use it, right?
Yeah.
So um, there's a bigger level of effort to that.
Yeah. I mean,
Uh,
therein lies the rub.
yes,
And
yeah, so it's we take each one, take it from a critical eye, and again, we can write it as a customization that is just for that one client. The other thing that makes that possible is we're single tenant, um, and have been since day one, and for a whole bunch of reasons. So each one of our clients is running on their own Slatwall instance,
mm,
kind of self-contained, which makes it easier to manage those things
mm,
as well, particularly if we're writing something custom for them.
mm,
Um, so that helps in that process as well.
right. And the open source version, is that on GitHub or
Yep,
nice.
yep,
And how
yep.
does your pricing model, to the extent you can share, work as far as do you have a commercial version and
Yeah,
license?
yeah. So we provide a SaaS version of Slatwall, commercially supported with a SLA, PCI compliant, and uh, there's a monthly fee to that. It's around $3,000, just under that, right,
Mm,
as a starting point. And there's some scaling in there based on transaction volume.
mm,
That base level offers 1,000 transactions a month, and then above that, there's a per transaction cost. So it's not we're not taking transaction fees, or it's not based on the dollar volume or anything like that. The transaction could be $1,000 or $1.
mm,
That as long as it's a transaction, there's a scaling to that.
mm,
So that's the model that we've been working on. Um, it's in line with most of the other platforms that are out there. Um, Again, we're dealing mainly with mid-market to enterprise, right? So we're probably, as you get into that kind of scale, a little bit lower cost than some of the other platforms that are out there,
Mhm.
because you're going to have to, you, let's take a Magento for instance. In most of our projects, if you were to build on Magento, you'd also have multiple add-ons, plugins, right,
Mhm.
that you'd have to be running as well,
Mhm.
right? So those add to cost and
Yeah.
resources to manage and upgrades and all those other things. So where Slatwall can do those in the core. Or some of the headless only platforms that are out there now. Again, they're great, super flexible. Developers can build whatever they need, but you're probably going to have to add on to that as well, stitch together a bunch of different um, you know uh, platforms in order to get what you need.
Yeah.
And again, that adds to cost and it adds to complexity. So when you start to look at kind of total cost, we tend to be a bit lower.
Right. Yeah, it's interesting because like extensibility was always a huge selling point in Magento.
Sure.
I built an extension company and
Yep.
stuff, and it was there was this real thriving ecosystem. But then you'd run into these conflicts between extensions and performance issues. And now I see that as I'm starting to look at the Shopify ecosystem, I see that same dynamic repeating itself, but it's in a
Mm,
SaaS context over an
yeah.
API. But you've got conflicts now at the JavaScript level instead of at the server side code level.
Mhm.
And there's kind of this reaction to that, and kind of a search for simplicity.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, there's good, there's the good and the bad of that. You know, going back to the WordPress kind of when we were doing a lot of CMS work back in the early 2000s, and WordPress has thousands of plugins, right? So everybody, this is great. We can get whatever we need to. Well, sure you can, but that comes at a cost.
Yeah.
And I think if you're if you're a business just starting out, right, in e-commerce, something like a Shopify is perfect, because you can get all of those things in one shop, one stop, build it, have it up and running, good to go.
Mhm.
Um, the issue becomes as you start to really kind of scale. You start, needing more functionality, and now you're adding more plugins, right? You want to, go, multi-channel, multiple different front ends, different countries and currencies and taxes, and it gets you can get out of hand pretty quickly.
Yeah.
Um,
What
and
are
and that,
oh, sorry, go
yeah,
ahead.
no, go ahead.
I would say, what are some of the, you mentioned, so somebody that's on a Shopify and is hitting growing pains, and then it's going to maybe make sense for them to use Slatwall. What are some of those specifics that you see them hitting? And we talked about subscriptions and some things like that. What are some of the other limitations that they'll see on Shopify?
Yeah, I mean, again, there's a difference between Shopify and Shopify Plus, obviously. But if you're again multi-channel, you're wanting to now do B2B and B2C, right? Or just B2B in general.
Mhm.
Certainly Shopify is not meant to be a B2B platform. Just selling B2B comes with a ton of complexity that B2C doesn't necessarily bring to
Mhm.
the table. So that would be one thing. But if you were selling both, right, wholesale and retail, you're gonna, the pricing complexities that brings for products, kind of the parent-child relationships you need on the
Mhm.
B2B side, some of the reporting and things like that. So certainly, B2B would be one. Again, things like we need to go to multiple currencies and multiple countries, and
Right.
um, is another. So those are some of the more common things that we hear. As for people who are looking to kind of graduate from one of those starting an e-commerce business to, okay, where do we go next?
Right. When it comes to B2B, that's an interesting space. There's a lot of development there in B2B commerce. What are some of the use cases that you're seeing? Some of the interesting uses of your platform for B2B?
Yeah. So a couple of things. One, subscription plays a part in that, right? So we've got a couple of couple of clients now who are selling curriculums to school systems, um, and that traditionally has been in textbooks,
Hmm.
or pamphlets, or whatever form that took. Now that's moving to a more digital platform, and not only is it digital, but how do they sell that as a subscription in a subscription model? So they're still selling, they're still selling the physical books,
Hmm.
uh, but they need to also deliver that curriculum in a digital way. So that there's a couple of clients we have that we're working on that side. Um, the we're working. So there's kind of two camps: manufacturers and distributors.
Yep.
They distributors certainly have a bit of a different dilemma than manufacturers. A lot of that usually revolves around the product data, right?
Hmm.
So we're working with a distributor here out of Massachusetts right now. I think they've got data coming from about 110 different manufacturers.
Hmm.
They're selling locks and keys, and the number of SKUs is insane.
Hmm.
Uh, and the way that they get that data from each manufacturer is a little bit different.
Hmm.
They've got an ERP that's been running for a while, but the data in there really wasn't set up to be, displayed on a website, right,
Hmm.
or merchandised in the way that you would need it. So we've got some tooling to get that data in from those ERP solutions, and in an elegant way that makes those projects kind of easier to get out the door and faster to get out the door,
Hmm.
because that's a huge challenge in almost every B2B. It's a bit behind the scenes for sure,
Hmm.
but it's something that again allows us to deliver faster, bring the cost of the project down, and an ongoing basis makes that distributor's life an awful lot easier.
Hmm.
Uh, so those are some of the things that we've been doing. Again, I think we've got another distributor out of Florida who's doing scheduled shipments of consumables, again along that subscription model. So those are some of the things that we're seeing.
Yeah, it's interesting. I hadn't realized that like your product could be used as a PIM
Mm,
by itself, which is interesting. That you've got all these systems talking to each other: your ERP, your PIM, your CMS, your CRM, and then many tools and platforms can sort of cover multiple of those systems in and of themselves. Like I would have thought of Slatwall as an e-commerce platform,
right.
but it sounds like you can. It's pretty flexible the way that you can deploy it.
Yeah, and again, I think it's something that every business has to evaluate, right? Um, there's a lot of PIM platforms out there, and their feature set is going to be greater than what Slatwall has. So maybe implementing that PIM and doing that integration into Slatwall makes sense. Um, Perhaps doing that initial launch just in Slatwall to start with, and then kind of adding that PIM down the road, right? Because of either the complexity or the cost of adding that other system. I think it's you as you just said, you're kind of looking at outside of Magento, what's the rest of this landscape, right? And you've got a background and you're technical. Can you imagine if you are, let's say, a director of marketing, or
Yeah.
and trying to make sense of all of this stuff, and this between headless and composable and this, it's yeah, it's a challenge for sure.
It's a lot. Yeah.
And so I think we um, and the energy that goes into that kind of engineering and understanding what you need from a business standpoint first is so important. Um, eh, instead of just kind of jumping into some technology because it might be the cool thing,
Yeah.
of the day. Uh, it's I think that's where businesses should be spending their time, is kind of understanding what their roadmap is, what are the kind of features they need today, 6 months, a year down the road, 2 years down the road, and starting there as opposed to kind of starting with the technology and letting that drive
Right.
the direction.
Right. What about manufacturers? What are some of the things that you would say to a manufacturer that was trying to kind of go through a digital transformation, and to help walk them through that process?
Yeah, I mean, I think the thing is, start slowly, right? Again, I think it's, um, particularly if you're going through these traditional sales channels. You got your salespeople on the road, kind of knocking on doors. You go into trade shows. You might have distributors that are out there, right, repping your product, and that's been great. That's kind of how the business has been run for however many years it's been run. And you don't want to, you're not going to disrupt those channels. You want to disrupt it as little as possible.
Mhm.
Um, so so that's all, and that's always been the kind of the roadblock as you talk to manufacturers. Well, I don't want to piss off all of those people.
Mhm.
So how do you start? I think starting slowly, with things like reorders, right? Um, so the sales guys out there, he wants to make the big initial order, right? The big sale, right?
Mhm.
But the batteries that somebody's buying every couple of months to as consumables,
Mhm.
they don't care about that. So I think it's kind of reordering consumables. Start slowly, or just a way for customers to see where their order is, right? What's the status? Just give them a way to log in and automate some of the operational things that are
Mhm.
happening right now that take tons of time on the phone. Um, let the salesperson get the order in, but then let them pay online, right?
Mhm.
Put the, even if it's a PO,
Mhm.
right? Just let them get the PO to you, so you don't have to chase them down for it, and
Right.
then they can see what the status of the order is. So I think there's a lot of operational things that you can automate. If you're starting to get into a digital kind of commerce world, that isn't going to necessarily upset your traditional sales channels
Mhm.
and can help make those more efficient.
Mhm.
I think that's where they should be thinking and starting.
Right, just incrementally. It's funny, I
Yeah,
was we were watching The Office, my wife and I recently, and there's the episode where they launched the new website,
yeah,
and as a paper manufacturer, they're, all the stuff we're talking about now, you're augmenting the sales reps, and the sales reps are all upset about it.
yeah.
And I was looking at this. I think the episode was made 10 or 15 years ago, but it's like
Right.
all of this stuff,
Yeah.
all these conflicts between the sales reps and the website.
Yeah. Yeah. And again, I think certainly that's the big, where B2B has been lagging, kind of, the B2C is because of that, right? And not wanting to kind of disrupt those proven sales channels. Certainly, COVID has accelerated that. As we kind of talk to people, at places like Gartner, that where digital commerce used to be kind of a discretionary spend, right? We'll kind of dip our toes in if we've got some extra dollars. It's now that's changed, right? Um, Again, if you may not go whole hog day one, but you better start down that path
Hmm.
because all of your competitors are. Um, so at least start to think about it and get the steps in place to get there.
Hmm.
I think that's certainly been accelerated by what's been happening over the last 10 or 11 months.
Yeah, it's COVID times are gnarly.
Yeah, yeah, no doubt. But that has started to happen. That was starting to happen anyway. I mean, buyers on the B2B side aren't getting any younger. You know, it was interesting. It was even like I think 2 years ago I was at a B2B conference, and there was a woman who was the CMO of a large manufacturer, was up and talking about how, the changes they were seeing with their out. They had an inside sales team, which typically had been junior people they brought in. Um, they were looked at as junior people. This is kind of where they get their feet wet, taking phone orders, right? And then they had their outside reps. But over the the 4 or 5 years leading up to this conference I was at, they had seen a shift where more and more orders were just coming in on that phone because the buyers didn't want to see a
Mm-hmm.
sales rep or have to go to lunch or go play
Mm-hmm.
golf or go to a trade show. I know what I want. I've done my research. Let me just call somebody and place the order.
Yeah.
And they had started to shift who they had in that inside sales group and put more senior people there
Mm-hmm.
because the opportunities on the sales side were coming into that inside sales team. So
Right.
it's been happening for a while, and that's not going to change. Again, the buyers on the on the B2B side are just getting younger. They're more savvy on the way that they research, and they want to be buying and doing business online just because that's the way their life is, right?
Yeah.
So it's again, COVID's accelerated it, but it's been coming for sure.
Yeah. Have you looked at Handshake at all? It's the B2B sales platform that Shopify acquired somewhat recently. I think they're
No,
trying to augment, yeah, their functionality with some B2B. I haven't looked into it too
what does
deeply
it do?
yet. I think it basically makes it easy for people to sell. I think it like makes it easier for people to sell something that they would have done by phone or fax. It makes it
Mhm.
easier for them to do online, kind of a thing.
Yeah,
So
yeah,
I think it was a pretty good size acquisition. Speaking of acquisitions,
yeah,
so I'm not I don't know too much about it, but it looks interesting.
yeah,
Um,
yeah. It's it's a challenge that almost every B2B company is facing, and it's just a matter of how quickly do they go through that transition.
yeah,
Um, uh, and again, every business is a little bit different. There's manufacturers that have super long, sales cycles and multi-million dollar, kind of pieces of equipment. It's certainly not going to happen online. Um, but but even in that case, the research is going to happen there. And again, kind of the follow up and the customer support and training and all of those things, right? Are things that you can deliver in a digital way that can make them more effective. So I
yeah,
think it's kind of looking at each business in a individually and what's kind of the best roadmap.
yeah. When it comes to like the relationship with sales reps within a company that the website is starting to encroach on what they do a little bit, and it seems like a lot of times the positioning is like, well, these tools are going to help you to do your job better, but I kind of wonder long term if those jobs are going to get phased out as eventually people just want to order everything online. It's a tough kind of thing to think
Yeah,
about.
again, for certainly for certain products, right? That could certainly happen. I think for others, again, if you're selling, $1 million piece of equipment, that's going to take, you know, multiple demos and on-site thing, and they're going to be cutting spec parts and all of those kinds of things. That's certainly not going to you're not going to do away with salespeople in that case. But
Yeah.
I think for sure, other products that are more commoditized, at price points that make sense online. Um, I think yes, that sales component is going to change for sure. Uh, so again, it depends on the product.
Yeah.
I think
Yeah.
we were on with a client today out of Oregon that sells audio uh, equipment into school systems, right? And that's a selling into school systems is a really complicated thing,
Mhm.
um, and so they've got reps all over the country. It's hard to imagine that they would go away completely
Yeah.
because there's so many people involved
Yeah.
in the process of that sale. If you're talking about a school system that's got like in California, I mean in Texas, what do you got, like 18 different districts or something, like 20 different districts,
Sounds about
and
right.
26 on the office, and then you've got all the schools within those. So there's a lot of levels to it and a lot of complexity.
Yeah.
So it's hard to imagine that a salesperson would get wouldn't be part of that process in some way.
Yeah. Yeah, that makes sense. When it comes to how things are going during COVID with your team and everything like that, how are you guys dealing with that? What are you doing to kind of stay sane in the midst of it all?
Yeah, I mean, we talked about restaurants earlier, right? I mean, we're not a restaurant, so we were already set up to be remote, and most of our, we've got about 30 people here. I'm actually in our office
That's
today,
good.
um, just, but we haven't come back yet. But we have about 30 people here. Most of them would have worked a day, maybe two at home anyway on a regular basis.
Mhm.
Um, so, you know, going operationally, kind of going remote wasn't a big deal. It was, on a personal level for each person was where the real challenge was,
Yeah.
right? And it's probably almost 50-50 where, uh, 50% of the people hate it
Yeah.
and can't wait to get back here.
Yeah.
um, and then the others really love it, and they love, they still want to come back into the office, but maybe they don't all love it, but they don't mind it as much. Um, the Certainly the challenge for somebody with smaller children at home, like school age children,
Mhm.
has been even greater, right? So you're trying to manage your work, your and your spouse might be working as well,
Yeah.
and you've got kids running around.
Yeah.
Um, so we've tried to shift schedules. So maybe they're working from 12 to 5 or 6. Um, Cut back hours a little bit for them. Try to work around as much of their life as we possibly can.
Mhm.
Um, we did right away. We did a stand up every day in the office anyway, right around lunchtime. So now we do a quick. It's not necessarily a stand up, but we do a quick check in the morning, just before 9 a.m. Um, and Anybody, kind of anything, any fires we need to know about, as we head into the day. It's usually 5 minutes long, and then we still do a stand up at 12 noon. That's usually 10 or 15 minutes, and we tell everybody close your laptop, get offline, take the next 45 minutes or whatever's left in that hour, and just
Mhm.
do whatever you want to do, right?
I love it.
But I don't want to see you online. I don't want to see you on chat. I don't want to see you doing anything. Just go be. So it's a little bit of a break in the day, um, forced break, for everybody.
Yeah.
Uh, we also do we used to buy lunch for everybody every Friday here and bring it in, which we can't do. So we've sent gift certificates, Visa gift cards home to everybody
Mhm.
every month, so they can buy their lunch. And we do a lunch every Friday for anybody who wants to join. Just a Zoom call. Somebody does a presentation typically about maybe some vacation they did, or something not work related. And then the other thing we've done is we've done kind of a chat roulette. We started off with matching everybody up randomly with one other person,
Mhm.
and we shifted that a couple of months ago to 3 people.
Mhm.
So every week, my HR manager just sends out a list. Here are the 3 people this week. Schedule that call,
Mhm.
and it's 20 minutes. Just during the workday, and hopefully you're talking about something other than work, and trying to get some of those personal connections that you're just not getting in the
Yeah.
office. So those are some of the things we did. I mean, I'm not going to lie. People have talked and argued about remote versus on-premise workers. I would rather have people, um, at least during the course of the week, have the ability to be in person with one another.
Yeah.
I think it brings a lot to the table. Um, but reality is, we've hired 5 people this year. We're in Massachusetts. I've got one in Ohio, one in Illinois, one in Pennsylvania, one in Virginia. So and another in Kentucky.
Yeah.
So, um, they're all going to be remote no matter no matter when we come back into the office. So
Yeah. That's great that you're being so proactive with it. I mean, everybody everybody says that they want to encourage work-life balance. Like I was talking to a buddy of mine, and he has a team, and he was like saying, what should I do to help them with work-life balance? And he works like 20 hours a day
Yeah,
nonstop. And at the end of the day, it's the things that you actually do that are going to kind of bleed off on the rest of the team. And I think the fact that you say, hey, listen, just take this time and do something else, close the computer. I think that's great.
yeah, yeah. It's a challenge. I mean, and everybody's different, right? I mean, I know I worked out of the house for the first 18 months of this company, um, and it's hard because for me, I get up at whatever it is, 6:30, 7 in the morning, and I open the laptop and I'm working,
Hmm.
right? Whereas if I was going into the office, I probably would get in here by 8:30, maybe
Mm,
8 o'clock, and I'd be doing whatever at home and getting ready and driving in. So I'm on as soon as I wake up, right? I'm on,
yeah,
and it's always hard to close the laptop, at the end of the day.
yeah.
Uh, it's funny. My son saw me leaving to come into the office today, and I came downstairs and I actually had real shoes on and not sweatpants.
Uh,
And he's like, "Where are you?" Because he knew I was leaving the house to go somewhere.
uh,
So you miss some of that, that part of the day,
yeah,
a bit. So we're looking to get back into the office, hopefully sometime in early 2021.
right, right. Yeah.
Hopefully, fingers crossed.
Fingers crossed. Yeah. I've been doing more of these podcasts, so it kind of forces me to brush my hair and get
Yeah,
dressed and all that, all that basic stuff. But it's nice. I mean, you see each other around the house all day, every day. So, it doesn't hurt when you've at least brushed your hair and,
yeah, yeah, yeah. It's fun. Yeah, I definitely get up in the morning. I check the calendar. I'm like, all right, who am I talking to on Zoom calls?
Right,
Today. Do I need to? I don't have to brush my hair. I don't have to deal with that. But
right,
do I need to shave? Do I have to actually, not have a hoodie on and a
right,
baseball hat?
right,
Um,
right.
so yeah, it's certainly different. And I keep telling my wife because I've got two boys are in college, so one has been remote since spring. The other went to school in this fall and is now home.
Ugh,
So we spent an awful lot of time with them, which we normally wouldn't because they'd be gone.
yeah.
I don't know whether they like it so much, uh, but I tell my wife, 5 years from now we'll look back, and who knows? Hopefully they will too,
Yeah,
and say, "Oh, it's kind of cool, right? We got to spend that time that we wouldn't have normally kind of
yeah,
had, right?
yeah.
Kind of cup is half full. That's it's been really good kind of quality time with them, and
That's great.
again, we wouldn't have had no otherwise.
You got to do a lot of drinking to make up for all the stuff they're missing out on.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah,
Yeah, I feel
yeah. I feel bad for them because
yeah,
uh, it's not a real college experience for sure.
yeah.
Uh, Still costs the same, um, which is another thing altogether,
It's
right?
unfortunate.
Man,
Yeah,
the fact that these colleges are getting away with charging the exact same tuition for remote learning as they are, for on campus is, you know, great if they can do it, but it's not even close to the same experience,
yeah.
right? Um, and
It's
at this point, I heard somebody talking about it. They're basically a subscription service, right? And it's just the content. So I'm paying 50 grand a year for that content,
yeah,
right? Are there other places I could be getting that for
yeah,
way less?
yeah,
Um, yeah, it's a challenge certainly for them going forward,
yeah,
because I don't think even with this going away, that kind of remote blended model is probably something they're going to have to deal with going forward.
yeah. And I can just imagine the schools are probably just trying to hold on by a thread. And I mean, I'm sure they'd love to charge much less, but they'd probably just
Oh, right.
fall
No, yeah,
apart.
they've, they've got to expand. Yeah, some of these smaller schools, like in uh, the city we're in, Worcester, I think has got 13 colleges, and most of them are small schools, and those are the ones that are they don't have huge endowments probably, and without kids on campus, um, it's it's going to be a real challenge for them, I'm sure,
Yeah.
as they go
Yeah.
forward.
Yeah, it's tough for everybody. I saw that you recently passed 12 years with your company. So congratulations on that.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. It's sometimes seems like it's been 30 years, and other times it seems like it's been 6 months. Uh, yeah, it's been an interesting. Every day is a different challenge, um, and you know, um, gratifying in a lot of ways, stressful in others.
Hmm.
Uh, but glad I did it. I kind of started a bit later in life, with the business. I guess the only regret I have was, I should have done it earlier. Um, I'd always thought about it, and been that close to doing it, but never
Hmm.
pulled the trigger.
Hmm.
Uh, waited till I was a bit older.
Hmm.
But yeah, I mean, no regrets. The people I've met and the employees and my partners and clients. It's been a lot of fun.
It's awesome.
Yeah,
it's we all have this narrative in our mind of the 20-year-old that quits college and builds the startup. But I saw there was an article or something recently that so many great companies were started by people in their 40s, 50s, and 60s even. And it's one of those things you don't think it's as common as it is.
yeah, no,
Um,
you're absolutely right.
yeah.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, there's some, there are some incredible ideas coming out of college. Some of these kids in college and recent college grads. We have we've worked with one. We've got an investment in a company called PairPay, payment app in the restaurant industry, who's doing well. Young kid right out of school here, super smart, and has done really well. But you're right. The you know a lot of the companies that I have seen, uh, and certainly been successful. Maybe not the kind of unicorn successful, but built an actual, real, profitable, sustainable business. Are like you said, people who started in their 30s or 40s, right
Yeah.
after a certain number of years of experience, and it's just a different model, and I think one that can definitely work.
Yeah. Well, congrats on all the success. Thanks for taking some time today. And where's the best place for people to find you online?
So the Slatwall website is a good place to start. That's slatwallcommerce.com. Um, if you want to look for me, I'm pretty heavy LinkedIn user, which is where we ran across each other. So, find me on LinkedIn and shoot me a request there. That's probably the easiest and best way to connect with me.